Alexander the Great versus Genghis Khan. Who was the greatest conqueror? Imagine standing on a battlefield and watching a young king charge directly into enemy lines, defeating every army that stands in his way and never losing a single major battle. Now imagine a warrior rising from poverty on the harsh Mongolian steppes, uniting rival tribes, and building the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. One conquered the known world before the age of 33. The other transformed a collection of nomadic tribes into a force that shook entire civilizations. Both inspired fear. Both changed history. Both became legends. But more than 1,000 years later, one question continues to divide historians and military experts. Who was the greater conqueror, Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan? Was it the undefeated battlefield genius who brought down the mighty Persian Empire, or the strategic mastermind who built an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Europe? In this video, we'll compare their origins, military genius, leadership, innovations, empire-building abilities, and lasting impact on the world before answering one of history's greatest debates. Hashtag two men, two worlds. Although both men became legendary conquerors, they came from completely different worlds. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Macedonia. He was the son of King Philip II and was educated by the famous philosopher Aristotle. From an early age, he was trained to rule, command armies, and continue his father's ambitions. When Alexander became king at just 20 years old, he inherited one of the most disciplined armies in the ancient world. Genghis Khan's story could not have been more different. Born around 1162 AD as Temujin, he entered a world of tribal warfare, hardship, and uncertainty. His father was poisoned when he was young, his family was abandoned by their tribe, and he spent much of his youth struggling simply to survive. Unlike Alexander, Genghis inherited no kingdom, no army, and no wealth. One inherited power, the other had to build everything from nothing. Yet both would eventually reshape the world. When Alexander became king, he wasted no time. He launched one of the most astonishing military campaigns in history. Within roughly 13 years, he conquered Greece, Egypt, Persia, Mesopotamia, parts of Central Asia, and regions of India. His empire stretched across 3 continents. Even more remarkable, Alexander never lost a major battle. Not one. Genghis Khan's rise was slower, but equally impressive. Before conquering empires, he first had to unite the constantly warring Mongol tribes. Only after establishing control over the steppe did he begin his campaigns against neighboring kingdoms and empires. His armies defeated the Jin dynasty, Western Xia, the Khwarezmian Empire, and numerous Central Asian kingdoms. By the time of his death, he had laid the foundation for what would become the largest contiguous land empire in history. Alexander conquered faster. Genghis conquered farther. One challenge when comparing Alexander and Genghis is that they lived in completely different eras. Alexander lived during the 4th century BC, when warfare depended heavily on infantry formations, cavalry charges, siege engines, and direct battlefield engagements. Communication was slow, maps were limited, and supply lines were difficult to maintain. His greatest enemy was the Persian Empire under King Darius III. At the time, Persia was the largest and wealthiest empire in the known world. It stretched across vast territories and commanded enormous military resources. Defeating Persia was considered nearly impossible, yet Alexander dismantled the empire in just a few years. Genghis Khan lived in the 12th and 13th centuries, a very different age of warfare. This is where the debate becomes truly fascinating. Alexander was perhaps the ultimate battlefield commander. He often fought alongside his troops and personally led cavalry charges. At famous battles such as Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, he repeatedly defeated larger armies through superior tactics, leadership, and battlefield maneuvering. Many historians consider him one of the greatest tactical commanders in military history. Genghis Khan excelled in a different way. He revolutionized warfare itself. His armies mastered mobility, intelligence gathering, strategic deception, psychological warfare, and long-range campaigns. The Mongols could travel enormous distances at astonishing speed and often knew more about their enemies than the enemies knew about themselves. Entire cities sometimes surrendered without fighting simply because of the fear generated by Mongol victories. Alexander mastered battles. Genghis mastered wars. Whenever historians compare Alexander and Genghis, one question always arises. Did they fight opponents of equal strength? Some historians argue that Alexander faced stronger battlefield opposition because the Persian Empire was the dominant superpower of its time. Defeating Darius III at battles such as Issus and Gaugamela required extraordinary tactical brilliance. Others argue that Genghis faced a wider range of opponents. His armies fought Chinese dynasties, Central Asian kingdoms, tribal confederations, and heavily fortified cities. Each opponent required different strategies and different methods of warfare. Alexander repeatedly defeated one dominant empire. Genghis repeatedly defeated multiple civilizations. Alexander mastered battlefield warfare. Genghis mastered large-scale strategic warfare across continents. This debate continues to this day, which is exactly what makes this comparison so fascinating. At this point in the story, who would you choose? Alexander or Genghis? Military innovation is another area where both leaders changed history. Alexander perfected what his father Philip II had started. He combined infantry, cavalry, and siege warfare into a highly coordinated fighting force. His famous Macedonian phalanx worked alongside elite cavalry units to create devastating battlefield combinations. Alexander did not invent these concepts, but he perfected them. Genghis Khan, however, introduced innovations that transformed warfare itself. His military system emphasized merit over noble birth. The most capable commanders rose through the ranks regardless of family background. He developed advanced intelligence networks, rapid communication systems, exceptional battlefield mobility, psychological warfare techniques, and coordinated multi-front campaigns. Many military concepts still studied today can trace their origins to methods first perfected by the Mongols. Alexander perfected existing warfare. Genghis transformed warfare itself. Leadership and loyalty. Great conquerors need great armies. Great armies require loyalty. Alexander inspired loyalty through charisma and courage. His soldiers saw him fighting beside them. He shared their hardships, crossed deserts with them, and risked his life in battle. Many followed him because they genuinely believed in him. Genghis Khan inspired loyalty differently. He built a system where talent mattered more than status. A skilled warrior could rise through the ranks regardless of birth. This merit-based approach united tribes that had spent generations fighting one another. Alexander inspired loyalty through heroism. Genghis inspired loyalty through opportunity. Both methods proved incredibly effective. Building an empire. Winning battles is one thing. Building a lasting empire is another. Alexander's empire expanded rapidly, but after his death at the age of 32, it quickly fragmented. His generals divided the empire among themselves. Although his cultural influence survived, the empire itself did not remain united. Genghis Khan's empire tells a different story. After his death, his descendants expanded the empire even further. The Mongol Empire grew into the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Its administrative systems, trade networks, and military structures survived for generations. Alexander built a conquest. Genghis built a system, and that distinction matters. Impact on world history. Both men changed the world, but in different ways. Alexander spread Greek culture across vast regions. His conquests helped create the Hellenistic world, where Greek language, philosophy, science, and culture blended with local traditions. This influence shaped the Mediterranean and Middle East for centuries. Genghis Khan transformed Eurasia. The Mongol Empire connected east and west like never before. Trade expanded, ideas spread, technologies moved between civilizations, and the world became more interconnected. Alexander shaped civilizations. Genghis reshaped continents. The numbers. The numbers tell an interesting story. Alexander never lost a major battle and conquered approximately 5 million square kilometers in around 13 years before dying at just 32 years old. Genghis Khan founded the largest contiguous land empire in history. The empire eventually reached approximately 24 million square kilometers, united the Mongol tribes, and created systems that survived long after his death. The numbers favor Genghis Khan. The battlefield record favors Alexander. Final verdict. So who was the greater conqueror? The answer depends on how you define greatness. If greatness means tactical brilliance, battlefield leadership, and an undefeated military record, Alexander the Great may never be surpassed. If greatness means empire building, innovation, strategic vision, and long-term impact, Genghis Khan has the stronger claim. But if we combine conquest, military innovation, empire size, longevity, and historical influence into a single measure, the edge goes to Genghis Khan. Not because he won more battles, not because he commanded larger armies, but because he built something larger, longer lasting, and more transformative than any conqueror before him. More than 1,000 years separated Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan. One inherited a kingdom and conquered the known world. The other rose from nothing and built the largest contiguous empire in history. Both changed humanity forever. But now it's your turn. Who do you think was the greater conqueror? Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoy history, empires, military strategy, great battles, and the rise and fall of civilizations, subscribe and join us for future episodes. Because history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how the world we live in today was created.